Hello, and welcome to Chasing Energy, where we provide insights for you to fuel a life worth living. This is episode number 13 with Seanna Thomas. I'm Daniel Lucas, by day and by trade. I am a VP of Innovation. I was an endurance athlete and an ultra runner for over a decade. My focus now is sharing practical and sustainable insights on mindset, nutrition, and training. Today's interview is going to focus around nutrition, and specifically, Seanna, who is the CEO of Hockey Snacks, is going to talk a lot about how we manage to get our kids to eat more healthy foods. What are some practical tips for how you can plan ahead for when the kids are going to go to a party, or you're going to be going out biking for the day and you don't want to default to junk food? This is gold nuggets of wisdom for people who are trying to get their kids to eat a little bit more healthy. One of my favorite quick tips for getting her kids to eat a little bit more greens was having challenges like having them put their own spinach in the smoothie, with the challenge of saying, how much spinach can you carry in one hand to put in the smoothie? There's a lot of recipes in this episode. One of my quotes here is that spinach is the vodka of the veggie kingdom, and that you can mix it in with a lot of different foods to add nutrition. We talk about avocado pudding recipes. How do you sidestep temptations? Here's another part: why I can't even look at gummies without getting nauseous, and a little bit of the story behind that. GORP is a term I learned during this interview, which stands for good old raisins and peanuts. It's how Seanna makes her trail mix. Allowing kids to have ownership of their nutrition. That is a big theme in this interview. Don't just force it on them. Get them to make their own choices and let them make their own mistakes too. Near the end, Seanna talks about her overnight oats recipe, which is also on her website. Seanna's Instagram is hockey_snacks. And before we start, one big ask of you. I have not had a single review in 2022. So be the first person to leave a review on this podcast. I will make sure that I read it on the air in the next episode. Thanks so much. Seanna Thomas, good morning, and thank you for joining me at Chasing Energy today.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And you hail from Toronto, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So I was just about to mention this before we started recording. The last podcast I did was with a training coach out of Toronto who was Marcus McKay, and he ran the Equinox.
Very cool.
Yeah. I love Canadian accents and their little twist on things. And I watched a few of your videos this morning. One was pecans. And so,
Pecans.
yeah. And well, there's the obvious ones like process and a boot.
Right.
And yeah. So when I was growing up in the South, they used to say, we keep our pecans under the bed and our pecans in the cupboard.
Oh, that's funny. My dad says pecans, and he always bugs me about it. And it's just one of those funny things, right? Like we all know what we're talking about, but yeah. I think you're the one with the accent. So it's funny to hear you say that.
I've come to look at the differences as something that's enduring and charming, not something where one is right or wrong.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited about today. You are the CEO of Hockey Snacks, and tell us a little bit about what your mission is there.
Sure. So I'm a nutritionist by trade, and I've been doing this for over a decade. And I started Hockey Snacks a few years ago when I really saw there was a gap in the market when it came to young kids, young athletes, and their nutrition. And so my mission really is to just help young athletes of any age and parents really learn how to fuel for performance with real whole foods and not depend on, the packaged electrolyte beverages and protein bars and shakes and things like that we all are, programmed to believe this is the only way to fuel your athlete. There's so many little things we can do that are small and simple using real food that don't have to be difficult, and that we can get into our kids that really help them with their energy levels, with their recovery. And, I think a lot of parents think with young kids that it doesn't really matter,
It
right? They're
doesn't
gonna
matter.
burn it
Yeah.
off. They can eat whatever they want. But if we start to establish these healthy habits now, they're just going to be the better for it, as they get older and as they continue in their sport.
So before I respond to what you said, I will tell you when I go back and listen to some of my interviews, I talk too much, and I'm going to really try to. This is one that the topic is so close to home, it's going to be hard for me not to digress. Uh, there's so much I could unpack there. You, during one of our calls in November, you mentioned, it was 8 a.m. and you saw them eating Doritos as a snack, your children. And that really hit close to home with me when you said that, in terms of the demeanor that I tend to run into when it comes to children and packaged foods is what you said. They're going to burn it off. It's fine. And there's some good science that says, your ability to leverage carbohydrates for energy is a lot higher when you're younger, but it diminishes with age.
Absolutely.
The issue that I think you and I are both running into is, at what point do you ask yourself whether or not they burn it off is not necessarily relevant as so much as what am I putting in their body, and is this a clean burning energy? Is this sustainable? The thing that I asked my children, my daughter the other day, she had a huge cinnamon roll just before I picked her up. And when I say she crashed, I mean, it was a hard crash. Now she's 11, she's not like 5 or 6, and what I do is try to not shame them or guilt them. I just say, how do you feel right now? And normally the thing is with children is time is not the same for a child as it is for us, right? So when they bite into the cinnamon roll, they are present. Something that I struggle to be is present. I mean, really struggle to be present. So I am jealous to some extent that they can just be in the moment like that and not think anything about consequences. But I also am the dad that says 30 or 40 minutes later, I'll set a timer. Like when they eat like 3 or 4 pieces, I'll check in with you in 45, 90 minutes and see how you're feeling.
Yeah.
That has helped me bridge the gap between actions and repercussions. So there's my first digression. I gave you a fair warning. But when you talk about the 8 a.m. Doritos, and I follow a very famous doctor called Dr. Peter Attia, who's a specialist on longevity. And he actually posted this last week, and I thought it would be perfect conversation for today. Okay. And that is, he has a weakness for wheat thins. And, most people would think of wheat thins as a healthy snack. It's really just processed food. And his wife basically I know you think that you can keep this perfect pantry with nothing in there, but also I have to feed the kids. So my first question for you is, the pantry is to me the most slippery slope.
Yeah.
Because it's within reach, and most parents are going to say, I want something I can just grab and throw at them because I'm doing a work call, or I'm doing this, or I'm trying to clean the house, and they just want a snack. So they want something convenient, but not to the detriment of their children. What advice do you give for parents to stock their pantry?
Well, that's a big question, and I love it. So, I mean, I've worked with so many parents over the years, and it's very common that, you know, parents, like you said, they just want to throw goldfish at their kids. And I mean, I've been there, right? I've been there.
Especially the colored goldfish.
Yeah, and I get the convenience of it. I absolutely do. You want something convenient. You want something your kids are going to eat because you want them to be happy. And I completely understand that. I think when it comes to the pantry, there's a little bit of planning that can come into play. And I know parents hate the word planning because you have to think of things in advance. But for me, my go-to snacks are always fresh fruit, which I know parents don't want to hear, right? And I know that's not a pantry item, and I promise I will get to that. But fruit is ready to go. It's pre-portioned, it's pre-packaged. It's got everything your kids need. It's naturally sweet. There's so many different varieties that are healthy and good for your kids and yourself that, you can find a fruit that your kids enjoy, that they'll want to eat like candy, or even, you know, find a way to present it to them that is a
Yeah.
little more desirable, right? Like
Yeah.
even my daughter, I mean, my kids all love fruit, but if I throw grapes in the freezer, that's it. She just needs a little bowl of frozen
Yeah.
grapes and she is like happy as a pig in mud. So, it's just about finding what they like and it takes a little bit. And if they're not used to eating fruit all the time and they're not used to having it as a snack, it might take a little bit of time. But I can't think of anything more perfect than a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
The other things that I like to give kids are homemade muffins or energy bites. And these are things too that are made with pantry ingredients
Yeah.
that you can have on hand. And I made a batch of muffins this morning while my kids were eating breakfast and they were ready to pack in their lunch. I mean, it doesn't have to be this long drawn out process, right?
Okay. And on those muffins, did you use like oat flour and flax meal type stuff?
Absolutely. So I always add in, I use a whole grain flour. You can absolutely use an oat or, alternative flours if you need
Yeah.
to. But it's banana muffins, right? So it's just mashed bananas. Yeah, flaxseed went in there. I use a little bit of, egg and applesauce instead of oil. And I keep them really, really simple. And my kids really enjoy them and eat them almost every day. And so they're a really nice, easy snack. And
Yeah, and muffins are something you can batch, right? You can make them on Sunday and throw throw them in the fridge so they can pull 2 or 3 out over the next 3 or 4 days.
absolutely. Energy bites are a really big one too that I always encourage parents to make.
Okay, so
Not,
energy
yeah,
bites, I'm going to assume you make those in the food processor, and it's probably some form of dates as a paste, and then nuts for fat and protein, and then maybe something for texture like coconut or something.
You know what? So I have a whole bunch of recipes for different energy
Yeah.
bites. I love those ones, but I have one that's even easier for parents to make, and their
Hmm.
kids can just throw everything into a bowl and make it. It's 4 ingredients. So it's just oats, hemp hearts, maple syrup, and nut butter.
Oh, I like the hemp hearts. That's a nice touch. That's a very nice
Yeah.
touch. You get a little.
And
Those have a little bit of omega-3s, if I'm not mistaken,
they
and
do omega 3
yeah,
and
some good
6. They have
fiber too.
calcium, magnesium, protein. Like 3 tablespoons of hemp hearts has 10 grams of protein in it.
Yeah, and
Um,
they're pretty neutral tasting. I can see how they would fit
mhm,
into that. If you eat hemp hearts straight, they taste like you're eating a candle. But
a little bit.
but yeah, but
Yeah.
I like that, throwing that in there. That's a good idea. The
Yeah.
thing I'll add to that, Shauna, that you just alluded to is when your child, the more they are involved with the process of preparing the food, the more emotional enrollment they have in the food. So, for example,
Absolutely.
if I make something and it has green in it or something like that, that my youngest will be very skeptical of it. They'll be like,
Mhm.
I don't want to eat it. And they even start the whole fake dry heaving before the food gets to their mouth. It's this big production. However, if they are standing there when I mix the food and I let them see everything that I put in there, they tend to be a little less skeptical of the look and feel of something when it comes out.
Absolutely. So to that example, I make green smoothies with my kids all the time, and we'll
Yeah.
call them Hulk smoothies. Give them a fun name, and kids will be more likely to eat them as well. Like
Yeah.
Brussels sprouts in my house have always been monkey brains, and for some reason, my kids love them. But green smoothies, I get my kids to add. I say, how big of a handful of baby spinach can you grab and throw in here, and make it a fun thing to do with them. And
Hmm.
then they'll drink it. And, we'll make peanut butter banana smoothies, throw a handful of spinach in there. You cannot taste the spinach, but it's almost kind of fun for them to make it this bright green color. And, my kids will proudly walk into, their hockey dressing room or, on the deck at the pool with this green smoothie and be like, oh, yeah, I'm drinking a green smoothie because they know, everybody else is going to go, oh, what are you doing? And it's a big
Yeah.
shocking thing, but they love the taste of it.
No, I completely agree. I will tell you my quote if I ever had a cooking show when it
Mhm.
comes to adding spinach, and that is that spinach is the vodka of the vegetable kingdom. You can add it to
Absolutely.
anything and it's flavorless and it adds what you need. So
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I love that.
so with the smoothies, I'll tap onto what you were saying earlier about fruit being should be your go-to. And you're gonna get some pushback from parents going, oh, well, it goes bad, and I don't have time to go to the store. Well, the freezer is your friend, and I will tell you that I do not ever throw bananas in the trash. And the same, actually, by the way, the same goes for avocados. When they get ripe, if you cube them into about 1-inch cube, put them in a Ziploc, and when you go to make your smoothies, it makes them so creamy.
Yes.
I love buying big bags of cubed frozen avocados for my smoothies for the kids.
Hmm.
So
And
go ahead.
I was going to say chocolate pudding too, made
Oh
with
yeah, yeah.
frozen avocado. So good.
Listen, I made a chocolate avocado pudding. I have probably made, over the last 7 years, I've probably made it about 300 or 400 times.
Yeah,
And
so
yeah,
good.
it used to be my go-to dessert for everybody. And the nutshell, for anyone curious, you use the base is avocado. It doesn't have to be frozen. It can be.
Mhm.
And then your form of nut milk or whatever, and then some vanilla, and then some form of sweetener. What you end up with is a chocolate pudding. From there, what I would say is if you want to top it with a little granola or toasted coconut, something for texture, it adds a lot of flavor. And then I also use a lot of cocoa powder to make it more of a dark chocolate. And then the last thing I'll add to that is to give it a smoky chocolate, you add in a teaspoon to a tablespoon of molasses.
Ooh, I've never done that. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. I like
So
that.
molasses is,
Yeah.
to me, the best sweetener where a little goes a long way, because you actually
Mhm.
don't want much. It's very smoky, but if you just use a little bit, it'll kind of give layers. And that's what I'm trying to say is when you go for something like a smoothie, like I'm not a huge smoothie fan, but if you can put layers of flavor in there, like with that avocado pudding, your brain likes to have textures. I mean, when you eat
Mhm.
a salad, Shauna, you don't just want spinach. You want, some type of crunch in there. And if you don't, for example, if you're watching your calories and stuff, if you dice celery instead of croutons, there's a way to
Mm.
kind of offset it and still get the crunch.
Absolutely. You're so right.
I don't get to talk food too much with guests, so this is nice.
Oh, I talk food all the time. Anytime you want to talk food, I'm here.
Yeah. So and yeah, and that's on your blog there. Love food. Let's talk about when you take your kids to the birthday party. Now, this is one I struggle with. Where do you generally draw the line of what they can and can't have, or do you not draw any line at all? You say eat whatever you want.
Well, this can be a tough one if you feel very strongly about limiting your child's sugar intake or, food colorings or additives or whatever you feel very strongly about. I'm on the side that, my kids eat really well, I would say 80% of the time.
Mhm.
And, I talk to parents about following their intuition a lot because parents always know what's right for their children. You know your children best, and you're going to make the right decision for them. So it doesn't really matter what I say. I can give you recommendations all over the place, but you're going to know in your heart what's right for your. And so, for me, certain things, they just aren't allowed in my house because I just don't see any kind of value, like hot dogs, for example. If my kids go to a barbecue at a friend's house and the only thing available is hot dogs, they can have a hot dog, but they are not going to come into my house. If they go to a barbecue and there's, a chicken burger and, a hot dog and other options,
Yeah.
I would hope that they would choose the other options because
Yeah.
they know better. But when it comes to birthday parties and things like that, I do let my kids go and, you know, indulge and have the treats. I don't like to be the parent that, brings the little box and says, this is your food and you can't have the party food, because I believe that kids deserve to have treats, and birthday parties don't happen every day.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said with the cinnamon bun, they might come home and crash. That's very possible and very likely. But, that's okay. And they're going to learn from it, and they learn how food affects their body. And I think those are important lessons to have too. If you avoid things completely, they're never going to know, the difference. And then one day, when they're out of the house and they finally have access to everything, they're going to binge on something they've never had before and have this like, whoa feeling and maybe get really sick and feel unwell.
Yeah.
But knowing in advance, okay, I've had, these grocery store cupcakes before, and I know afterwards my stomach doesn't feel so well or whatever. I mean, that's happened with my kids. I think it's a good lesson for them to learn and then learn about how to manage that and balance that out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I don't think parents of teenagers do this anymore, but it used to be if you caught your kid, when I was growing up, if you caught your kid with a cigarette, you made them smoke like a whole carton or something so they would never
Right.
touch it again or whatever. I can tell you that I had a childhood incident at Christmas when I was a child where they had several buckets of gummy worms and the people didn't show up to get them, so I ate them. I think I went at least 25 years before I could look at a gummy after that and not get sick to my stomach. I mean, it scarred me immensely. So
Yeah.
I'm in the middle, by the way. I'm not as quite, I don't let them go hog wild at birthday parties, but I also don't bring the tray either. My approach is you get one sweet, and I know that they're always going to have, I don't know if it's an American thing or what, Shauna, but it's like every single kid's party has to have pizza. It's like some requirement.
Yes.
And so my deal with my children is you have a sweet, pick any sweet you want, and they know if you get a soda, that is your sweet. So
Yes.
don't come to
Yes.
me and say I had a Coke and now I want this jumbo cookie and then a slice of cake. I'm like, you pick a sweet. You can have any sweet you want, but pick a sweet. And they're very methodical about it. They'll be like, ooh, well, do I want the cake or do I want this? Or
It gets them thinking about it though, and I think that's really important too. It's an important lesson, and I think there's something to be said for restricting completely. I years ago when I first became a nutritionist, I was more on the extreme side of things.
Yeah.
And it's through experience that I've learned more about stepping back and having more of a balance. But my kids, when they were younger, we didn't have any sugar and I wouldn't, let them have anything. And then one time my son went to a hockey game with his hockey team. And, I was over here talking to the parents and I didn't realize that over on the other side of the room, they were bringing them ice cream sandwiches and cookies and cans of pop and juice and pizza. And, it didn't stop. It was constant cookies. And my son came up to me and he had a can of juice and it was like half finished. And he looked at me and he said, "Mom, I don't think I can drink this anymore." And I was watching him go green. And we just made it to the washroom in time for everything to come back up.
Yeah.
And that was an important lesson for him. But it also taught me that, maybe I was restricting too much. Maybe having a treat every once in a while. Like now, my family, we have ice cream Fridays. So we're not having dessert every single night. We're not overloading, but it's something we can look forward to. We have a reasonable amount. And it's a much more balanced approach to food, and I think
I like that,
much
Shauna.
healthier
I like
one.
that very much. The ice cream Fridays is you're putting it as like it's on the calendar, it's scheduled, you know what to expect. It gives them something to anticipate.
Yeah.
I had read a study one time where they asked, like, I'm making up the numbers here, but it was something like 50 people that had been healthy for many years and 50 who struggled with their weight. And the number one common denominator that they found with the healthy people when they were tempted, they still felt the same things when they were tempted, but the number one thing they would say to themselves was, I'll have something later today. So in other words, they just sort of sidestepped the temptation and said, I'm not going to deal with this right now, but if I'm hungry and want a cookie later today, I'll have it. So
Right.
when you have that, we're going to have ice cream Friday. It sort of sidesteps the, well, let's just kind of, let's anticipate that treat and look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun, we get a different kind every week and test it out. And it's something that we all look forward to, including myself and my husband, like
Mhm.
we We eat very well, and I like the idea of eating really well to the best of your ability, like 80% of the time. So you don't have to feel guilty the other 20% of the time,
Yeah.
having wine with friends, ice cream Fridays, birthday cake, right? You know right after that happens, you're going to wake up the next day, have a really excellent breakfast and just get it's not even about getting off track and on track. It's just living life.
No, and I look, living life is when you can get to this point where the stress caused by something is more detrimental than the thing itself. And so the thing that you're probably already a master of this, Shauna, but the thing that I'm sort of give myself grace on is quantity versus quality. And this is where I go, you just brought up the wine, right? For me, I know with whether it's a really like I'll have a bite of really good ice cream or something, but I also know that I don't really enjoy it after about 4 or 5 bites. Like it's just
Right.
habit after that point. And the way that I was raised by my father, especially here in the South, is you get as much volume as you possibly can of
Right.
any given product. So if they offer you an extra scoop for $1 and a third scoop for $50, then you're going to get all three. Now,
Mhm.
I've since sort of stepped back from that. There were a lot of studies where they played with people's plate size and bowl size. So, for example, they sat these 8 people at a dinner and they said, have as much soup as you want. What they didn't know was that there was a pipe coming into the bottom of their soup bowl, refilling it as they were eating it. And all they knew
Oh,
was you can have as much soup as you want, just eat till you're full.
right.
Well, when that soup was continuing to come in, people would eat an enormously much more soup. And then the second thing was when they did a test where they had these families come to movies, they would give bigger popcorn boxes to some people and smaller. And what they found was you eat relative to the size of what you have in front of you. So
Absolutely.
I have since become much more methodical over the last several years over if I make myself a plate for dinner, I actually am very conscious of how big a plate do I need.
Mhm.
If I'm going to have a glass of wine, how big a glass do I need? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
I yeah. So I could digress on that topic as well, but let's talk a little bit about how do you tell me some. I saw your video on, for example, making granola, which that's a very good video, by the way. Yeah. So when you talk about packing snacks for the kids, what is your go-to if they're going to go play hockey? Do you pack the energy? What is your like to-go meal? Smoothies aren't very portable, so what kind of things do you like to take with you?
Well, actually, I find smoothies very portable, especially in the winter here in Canada, because you can make one and leave it in the car and it'll still be nice and cold for you after
Oh, well, there you
they're
go. Yeah.
finished, right? But apart from that, I would say trail mix is a really big one for our
Yeah.
family. And, I'll make it really fun for my,
Do you use like
yeah,
milk chocolate or dark chocolate or what's your trail mix?
no chocolate. So
No
we
chocolate. Okay.
do, yeah, we usually do a whole bunch of different kinds of nuts. We'll throw in some dried fruit, some pepitas, like pumpkin seeds. But there's nothing really sweet in there. It's more about, well, I guess the dried fruit is sweet, right? So, I mean, I
Yeah.
I love the combination of even just, have you heard of GORP? Good old raisins and peanuts? And
No.
it's just the I don't know, that's what we called it. When I was growing up, it was GORP. But it was just raisins and peanuts, and it was like this amazing snack that my mom used to make, and I used to think it was just the greatest thing ever, and looking back, like, how simple is that? But it has so much goodness for you and energy, protein, carbohydrates, fats, all that good stuff, right? So we really stick to just nuts and dried fruit and maybe some seeds in there, and that's really our trail mix that is great for the kids. And once again, something you can leave in the car, so that you don't always have to remember to bring something with you. And I'll give my kids each their own jar and they can make their own mix,
Yeah.
shake
Oh,
it
going
up,
back
make
to
it
being
fun.
involved again. I like that.
Absolutely. It's so important. I one of my goals with my kids and any, children or young athletes that I work with is just giving them ownership over their nutrition so they feel comfortable enough in the kitchen to navigate,
Hmm.
and know what's good for them, but also how to make something, even if it's
Yeah.
as simple as trail mix, throwing stuff in a jar, or an energy bite, or a sandwich, or scramble some eggs, right? I want my kids to be comfortable doing those things. I want all kids comfortable doing those things, because the last thing you want is your kids, leaving the house and then depending on all of these packaged products.
Yeah, and look, that doesn't change when you're an adult either. When you go to the
Mhm.
office and you don't pack your lunch, you are at the mercy of whatever's in front of you. And so
Absolutely.
there's something to be said. I had in my notes regarding the birthday parties and stuff. Sometimes I'm proactive in the sense that I know I'm going to a birthday party, so I make them eat some real food before we go, so they're not
Yeah.
starving when they get there. And like you said with the juice. Juice to me is the devil in a red dress, where, it's you go to these things and people are like, because we're doing the healthy thing here, we decided to get everybody like something Capri Suns with vitamin C or something like that,
Hmm.
and or it's Gatorade, so it's healthy, right? So that is one thing I do. How are you when you're so do you do the trail mix to be kind of proactive with your children, or even with yourself? How do you keep yourself from being tempted if you're going to a party at you and your husband's friend's party house?
I think so. Like you said, having something to eat before you go is
Hmm.
crucial. Especially, it depends if you're going for dinner. It depends if you're going to a party where there's going to be a table full of food. But I like it, you and I think talked about this earlier about having a salad before you go.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do those kinds of tricks with my kids too. If they come home from school and there's a few hours before we're going to have dinner, I'll put out a vegetable tray, with some hummus or something for them. And that way,
yeah.
even if they don't have the vegetables at dinner, I know they've already had some, right?
Yeah,
And
I
it's
think
the
you had
same with
mentioned the
us.
hummus. That's a good approach there because it gives you a little bit of
Mhm.
fiber, right, and a little satiety. A classic example is someone calls me and says, "Hey, come meet me at this pizza restaurant." And I'll be like, "Man, if I go there hungry
Yeah.
and I haven't eaten in 3 or 4 hours, I exercise a good bit, whatever. I'm going to be starving when I see that pizza. And even just waiting on that pizza, I'm going to be starving." So I do try
Yeah.
to offset that with some type of, like you said, whole food, veggie, fiber, and then have a slice or two.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another good approach when you go to a party, if it's not a dinner party and they're just going to sort of be party food,
Yeah.
around, the best thing you can do is really survey what's available. And
Hmm.
maybe bring something like bring a veggie tray or bring a healthy option if it's going to be something like that. But I like to survey what's available. Don't stand by the table or the meatballs or whatever it is. Look at everything that's available to you and then make your choices accordingly. Have a couple of things that you really want, like, whatever that you don't have all the time, something that's really
Hmm.
special, something is going to be a 10 out of 10, and then fill the rest of your plate with something is going to nourish your body, make you feel good, and it shouldn't be a punishment, it should be fun. It should be a party, but there's no reason that you can't eat good food and then pair it with something, tasty, and that's a treat as well.
You're well said, Shauna. You seem to be very balanced in your approach. One of my, I know I did warn you I would talk too much during this thing.
No, not at all.
One of my tips for myself, this is not for other people, this is my rule for myself, and that is when I eat dinner, I have to wait 20 minutes before I go back to get something else because I tend to be because I'm usually starving by the time I get to dinner. And when I don't eat fast, but man, when I eat that food, I'm like, well, I am still hungry. And
Hmm.
I have got to I tend to say, give it at least 15, 20 minutes because what you think is an empty stomach is not going to be empty much longer. And I'm not saying I don't go back and eat something after 20 minutes, but it's probably a lot less than it would have been. So
Yeah. And
that,
that's an important lesson too for families that serve food on the table and allow, everybody to just help themselves, because we found with our family, I love serving food family style. We'll have taco nights and things like that
mhm.
where I just put everything out on the table. it's a good thing for families because then
Yeah.
everybody can make what they want. There's less fighting, especially if you have multiple kids that like different things. But at the same time, there needs to be a limit, right? Because if the food's in front of you and you're just eating, then yeah, there's still more of that. Well, I want more of that because it tastes good. You're not thinking, am I really hungry? Have I waited? Did I take my time eating this? Because you're right, it takes 10 to 20 minutes for your brain to register, that you've eaten this food, that your stomach is full. And that's from the last bite of food, right?
Hmm.
So it's a very smart approach to wait. And so we stopped doing, not all the time, but it's much more rare now that we do family style meals. We serve from the kitchen, we bring out and my kids are all different ages, all different sizes. I have my 12-year-old son who's almost as tall as I am. He's a big kid. He needs way more food than my
Hmm.
9-year-old daughter, who's half his size. So, I'm able to control the portions, give them what they need. And then truly, if they're truly hungry and we have these conversations with them, and I think communication is really important, really think, are you hungry? Or do you just really like spaghetti?
Yeah.
And it's really important questions that your kids can ask themselves. And sometimes we'll do brunches on Sunday so that we can have a nice lazy morning. And those are the only mornings that we really have any kind of breakfast meat if we do it all. And
Yeah.
so, the kids are like, ooh, there's bacon or there's sausages or something
Yeah.
like that, right? So they always want more. But I only cook up enough for one or two each. And
Hmm.
you're getting the satisfaction of having it without, overdoing it, which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Hmm.
satisfaction is the key there, right?
Yes.
My son is 13. His two hobbies are sleeping and eating. And when he goes to the fridge, which is, after he's gotten out of bed at noon or on Saturday or whatever,
Right.
his go-to, which I know this, I'm not complaining, but his go-to is Granny Smith apples. So I keep the fridge
Oh,
stocked with Granny Smith apples. That's his go-to. Now, when I went to visit my mom on Sunday and he was with me, she had a bag of like Red Lobster biscuits or something. He ate the entire bag of biscuits because it was right there. The point being, he loves those carbs of apple and stuff. So what I try to teach him is for satiety, you need to start looking at a protein. You're not going
absolutely.
to, I'm like, I love that you're eating apples, but you're going to constantly be hungry until you eat some eggs or something that's going to
Yes.
curb that. But in his head, he's thinking, what do I have to do the least amount of work to eat right at this moment so I can go back to what I was doing?
Right. Well, apples, I mean, there are definitely worse choices than apples,
Oh
but you're
yeah.
right.
Again,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to have that problem, but that has to
Yes.
do with me keeping the pantry stocked the way I like to stock it. So,
Right. Well, and good for you. It's working, right?
mhm.
But you're right. Like protein is one of those things I always say in the morning, protein and fiber. Protein and
Mhm.
fiber. If you can get those two things into you, you're going to be way better off throughout the day, make better choices, be fuller longer, right? And one of the things that I make for my kids, because my kids love apples too, but not really on their own, is I make I call it my cookie dough dip, but it's made from a can of beans. So, my kids, they know it too. Like
Oh no,
we'll
no, no! I want to hear what's in it. I want to hear what's in it. Go ahead.
so it starts with a can of chickpeas or white beans,
Yeah.
white kidney
Okay.
beans.
Yeah.
Blend it up in the food processor. I add some nut butter, hemp hearts, rolled oats, a little bit of maple syrup, like really a tablespoon, to
Yeah.
sweeten it up, and a little bit of salt because we love the sweet and salty in our house, and that's it. And I throw it in a bowl with some apples, and it's gone. And they're eating beans. They're eating apples and beans, and it's fantastic.
No, and that's a good point because I was actually going to say with the Granny Smiths, I try to encourage them dip it in some nut butter or something to give you satiety. But I like
Yes.
what you said there. I was going to guess that dip had chickpeas. Chickpeas is very neutral. I've actually made a dark chocolate dip out of
Mm,
chickpeas, which same sort of concept as the avocado pudding, which is
right.
it's chickpeas are very neutral, right?
Yes.
And so blended with a Vitamix, you can get it to where the texture is pretty close to almost like a chocolate hummus or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even my father who, he you couldn't get him near like in the same room as a bean. He saw me make this and he was like, that's disgusting. And then he tried it. I'll give him
Yeah.
credit. He tried it and he couldn't stop eating it. So,
Yeah.
if my dad can eat this dip, every single person can eat this dip.
I completely agree, Sean. My father refused to ever touch an avocado. And when I started making that avocado pudding, he would ask for it every time I came over. He'd be like, do you think you could make that avocado pudding? It's my favorite dessert.
Wow.
So, there's something to be said for your mise en place and your how do you prepare something in a way that takes it from something they would abstain from to making it something that's appealing to them. And that's probably been the theme of this podcast, which is how do we go from taking our children to a point where this is something I'm not interested in to something that I crave? Because most people, and I know that's a typecast there, but society in general, when they think of health food, they think of bland, flavorless. If I were to preach, because again, I'm a pretty serious home chef, and one thing I cannot stand is when people go out and they're on some type of healthy diet or something, and they buy a bunch of chicken breast and then cook it at 400 in the oven, and I'm like, it is the most tasteless protein you're ever going to have when you take a piece of chicken that's not been marinated or prepped in any way, and you throw it in the oven at 400 for 45 minutes to where it's just this tough piece of
Dry.
thing. Yeah. So much like my spinach being the vodka of the vegetable kingdom, I think chicken is the most bastardized protein out there. I think it's the one where people use it and abuse it because but chicken done right, it can be a really nice experience.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And we use actually chicken thighs nowadays more so than chicken breast, just so much more flavor in there. There's more nutrients in there.
I'm a dark meat person. Do not get me wrong. I can eat chicken breast, but I'm generally a dark meat person. A chicken thigh, which I keep the skin on, but I cake it in salt often the day before I cook it, so that when you bite into that chicken, the flavor is all the way to the bone. You can always tell when someone just sprinkles salt on right before they cook it. It's just on the outside. But when you bite in that chicken, it's tender and juicy all the way to the bone. It's a different experience. So there's your tip. If you want good meat, I wasn't talking to you, I was just saying in general.
Me too.
My tip for meat is always start the day before, and you'll have a much better experience with your food.
Yes. Well, that goes back to planning and preparation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a little bit of planning can go a long way.
Absolutely. So the planning and preparation, one other thing I'll add, I do the overnight oats, and that's something most families can do on Sunday and then portion that out to where it's ready to go. I'll put a link to your website so people can see some of the recipes you've made. If you want to go ahead and speak to some of them, but I'll go ahead and plug. You need to check out her homemade granola. It's worth checking out.
Thank you. Yeah, my oats are one of my favorite foods. I absolutely love them. They're full of fiber. They're so, so good for you. They're very neutral as well when we're talking about neutral food. So you can customize them. Your kids can customize them. My two favorite ways of making them, one is overnight oats. So I love this using a rolled oat, adding a nut milk or whatever you have available, and then flavoring it how you like. We usually just add like a vanilla, nothing too crazy in there, some hemp hearts for a little bit of extra protein, a little bit of extra fiber, all those good vitamins and fats. Shake them up, leave them in the fridge overnight. And then in the morning, you can add berries, you can add coconut and pineapple, you can add banana and peanut butter, whatever you like. My kids absolutely love overnight oats. And the other way I like to eat oats is steel cut oats. So these are much less processed, take longer to digest, really, really good for you, but they take forever to cook. So what I do is the night before I want to have, so like on a Sunday night, I'll put them on the stove, bring them to a boil, turn off the burner, put the lid on and leave them. And in the morning, you have the most beautifully cooked, perfect steel cut oats, and you can make enough for the entire week. So, just so versatile and fantastic, and a great way to start your day.
Nice. And what was
Mhm.
the brand? I know you mentioned it in your video. What was the brand of oats you prefer?
I like Splendor Garden. They are a Canadian oat company out of Saskatchewan, a family-run company. They also have amazing organic spices as well. They have this ridiculous cinnamon that I'm just obsessed with. But they also have like spice mixes and stuff, all low salt, really great. And but really like anything you can get your hands on when it comes to oats, but if you are gluten sensitive, just make sure that you do find ones that are certified gluten free because a lot of them are processed in the same facilities as wheat.
Hmm.
So you just need to be careful with that. But yeah, I love them. They're so good.
All right, Shauna, we'll wrap up with two things here. One is when you're at a coffee shop or something and someone stops you and says, "Hey, my energy has been a little down lately." What is your first go-to when someone asks you that question? What's your first sort of go-to response?
I usually ask them, if they're relying, well, if it's in a coffee shop, I ask them if they're relying on food or if
Hmm.
they're depending on things like caffeine, because caffeine isn't truly giving you energy. Food is that fuel that you
That's
need for
right.
energy. So, it always comes back to what you're eating and what you're putting in your body. So it can be a pretty easy fix if people are low energy. But there's so many things connected with that, right? It's a healthy diet, it's stress levels, it's sleep. But starting with nutrition is an easy one for me and where I would
Okay.
go
Yeah,
to
and
for sure.
that's a good answer actually, because if you're in a coffee shop, you're already getting stimulus, and if they've got a muffin and the coffee in their hand, that might be a good place to start. Thank you for
Yes.
that. Shauna, where would you like people to find you or follow you and those type of things?
People can find me, well, I'm all over the internet. So hockeysnacks.com is my website. I'm on
Hmm.
Instagram, hockey_snacks. Facebook, Hockey Snacks. We've got a free group there called Fuel More Wins, if you look that up. And that's for
Hmm.
parents to really find great recipes and tips to fuel performance and just their day in general. And yeah, you can email me at Seanna@hockeysnacks.com as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I appreciate your time so much, and hopefully the parents have a few more weapons in their tool belt here to on the battle for nutrition here. And I'm grateful for your time. Thank you so much, Shauna.
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too.